Welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and most certainly make fun of them. Today, I'm going to do an update to a pretty popular series I've been covering, which is titled, "A Wife of 7 Years Opened Our Marriage Without My Knowledge Has Breakdown When I Toss Her in the Suitcase Out." And guys, as a brief recap, because it's been a little while, and I do mean brief, that's about the guy, early 30s, married for a few years, thought he had a good thing going. And then, lo and behold, his wife was supposed to be going on some sort of business trip. Came home early to wish her, to say goodbye to her, all that, and overheard her having a conversation on speakerphone with the dude she was going with, a coworker. Turns out they were going for a romantic getaway. Heard the whole thing, confronted her, and she was so full of herself and so full of disdain for her husband, she admitted what she was doing and admitted that was good for their marriage, basically opening up their marriage without his permission. And this guy not having it. And he handles things accordingly, which many of you recall. The next thing you know, boom, 180, she's begging him back, all that. Nope, this guy's done. And that went over part 1 and 2, I believe. And the last parts, 3, 4, and 5, as you saw, was him dealing with the whole fiasco with her work and her work, his lawyers. And if I recall, his lawyer recommended, based on where they live, to minimize the fallout of the divorce, to try to pretend like they're trying to make things work, but get her to sign over things like the house and all those things on the basis that he would try to give it a second chance. Meanwhile, planning to wait a period of time and then divorce her once she signed everything over to him, if I recall. So now we're going to pick up where things left off, and just let you know, now this is long, so it'll be 2 parts. Part 6, which you're seeing right now, and Part 7, which I'll do a couple hours after I publish this. So if you don't want to wait around, you can stop now, come back later when they're all both published, and watch away. But anyhow, that's all I'm going to say with regards to the recap here. So it picks up where he left off. He says, hello, SSM. A lot of people suggested I cut my losses and immediately proceed with the divorce. Better than having to deal with Beth for a year or more. Just get away from her and move on. Another thing I should clarify is the nature of our separation. I've not seen or talked to Beth since I smacked her and threw her out. He did, if you recall. This was after I discovered her plans to spend the weekend with her coworker, Tom, over a month ago. I hope to never see or talk to her again. We communicate now solely through email. She'll never live in my house again. She knows that if she threatens me with anything, divorce if I don't take her back, or exposing that I slapped her, or I'll tell her I'll see her in court. I don't care what it costs me, I'm never going to live with Beth again. No one can blame you, man, but your lawyer's saying, I always say listen to your lawyer, but your lawyer's saying somehow find a way to endure this so you can get the best deal. But if you figure, hey, I don't want to deal with it, nobody can blame you, but financially you could take a bigger hit. But every day I weigh just putting this all behind me, going ahead with divorce. Even if the judge takes what's rightfully mine and gives it to Beth, at least it'll be over. Here's why I just don't divorce her. Brief history, I dated in high school and college, but had only one serious long-term relationship before Beth. I met a gal, sophomore year in college, but junior year, she and I were exclusive. By senior year, we had decided to live together after graduation. I thought that she was the one. I believed that she and I would someday marry and start a family together. Well, you're a typical young guy thinking that type of thing. We've all been there. Most of us, at least. We both went to our respective partners' homes during semester break our senior year. We talked once or twice every day. Mostly she would call me, and we talked sometimes for an hour or more. That's a lot of talking. Can't you all be away for a little time and space? Young love. Supposed young love. Planning our future between Christmas and New Year's, she started to hang out with her girlfriends from high school. Uh-oh. The calls from her became less and less frequent, and when we did talk, she seemed distant and distracted. Gee, I can see where this is going. I asked her what was going on, and she explained that being with her friends was like being back in high school, with all the petty rivalries, jealousy, and backstabbing. And her friends were just as well as they were in high school. They're not her fucking friends. But you know what? Frenemies keep the drama and excitement going. And that's why these types hang out with frenemies. Those guys don't hang out with frenemies because guys don't want fucking drama. Well, most guys don't want drama. Even her married girlfriends acted like they were still single. She had married girlfriends while she was still in college. 2 married friends were constantly fighting over some guy that they met at a club. He was banging both of them. Another friend who married right out of high school was now in the midst of a divorce. She had one horror story after another about how bad marriage is, and her divorce is even worse. My girl said she felt like she was the only adult among them, but also that she was being sucked into their dramas and plotting. Then again, why are you hanging out with them? And they're going to rub off on her. And this guy, he should know this, but he didn't back then. I asked why she keeps hanging out with them if it upsets her so much. She says they've been friends forever. It was fun acting crazy and irresponsible like she was back in high school. Ding, ding, ding. In other words, drama. And she didn't want to sit around at her parents' house. After New Year, she'll be back to being an adult. Red flags everywhere. Swinging back and forth in the wind. Red flags. I'd rather be with the parents. New Year's Eve was on Saturday that year. She planned to hang out at a friend's house with some other people, and she told me it would be just the girls. Uh-huh. When I called her late Friday afternoon, she told me she really didn't have time to talk. She had to get out and get ready to go out. I said, okay, goodbye, and hung up the phone. I didn't hear from her all day Saturday. I went out to a sports bar with some friends, but I was concerned that I hadn't heard from her. I also felt bad about hanging up on her. I went out to the parking lot of the bar about 8 p.m. and called her. It went right to my voicemail, or her voicemail. So you can see where this is going, guys. And this is his backstory leading to why he is the way he is. Remember that. Her phone was on because it didn't immediately go to voicemail, and my call didn't ring enough times to go to voicemail on its own. No, she saw it was me calling and declined the call. I then got a text from her which read, "Can't talk, out with friends, talk tomorrow." What the fuck? She was too busy with her friends to talk to the person she claims to love. It was clear to me that I wasn't her priority and that she thought she'd get away with dismissing me. This was it for her. And I blocked her number. Well, you knew something was up. Pay attention to a person's actions. Next day, she called my mom's cell asking to talk to me. My mother told me that if I wanted to talk to her, I'd call her. My mom hung up on her and blocked her too. After the semester started, I found her sitting on the floor outside my dorm room waiting for me. She wanted to talk. She doesn't understand why I'm so upset. Did one of her so-called friends call me? Whatever they told me about her and her ex was not true. Oh, how interesting. Thanks for revealing what happened. She was fooling around with her ex. She bumped into him at a bar and they talked for a while. He hung out with her and her friends some. That's all. She really didn't do anything or anything wrong. It was all completely innocent. She can explain. I said, there's nothing to explain. I told her to stay away from me and left her in the hallway. Well, there you go. When you're done, you're done. Writing this, I wondered what happened to my 22-year-old self. Back then, there was no indecision, no waffling, no wondering if I made the right decision. Well, you weren't married back then. There were no consequence. You break up with her, done, end of story. But you have a house together and all these things together and you're legally bound. That's the difference. I wasn't important enough to her to pick up the phone, so I ended immediately with her. No surprise that ditching my call was just the tip of what was probably even worse behavior. But unlike when I was 22, my current 34-year-old self, I agonized for days what to do about Beth. Again, because you're married to her. Had I changed that much? Had I become that needy? I decided to give myself a break. I wasn't with my college girlfriend for 10 years and married to her for 7. Hard to part with Beth after all that time together. But eventually came to the right decision. I'm done with Beth. Nobody can blame you here. However, still listen to your lawyer. Anyway, after the experience from the college girl, I decided to forget relationships and concentrate on my future. There's an idea. Finish college and start my career. Plenty of time for marriage and a family once I've established myself. I graduated and got a job at the IT reseller I'm still working for. Lots of disappointments and long hours trying to learn sales, but eventually became a good salesman and started to make decent money. Well, good for you, dude. You didn't give up. Don't really care about having the latest gadget or driving around in a shiny new sports car or having the latest cell phone with all the new features that I'll never use. I don't need to impress anyone with all the possessions I have. So instead of spending my money on stuff I don't need, I decided to save and invest what I made. Amen. There you go. You're light years ahead of most people. And here we go with the alarms. Never fails. I'll be back. It wasn't that I was depriving myself of anything that I wanted. I didn't surround myself with all the junk my friends did. It turns out I'm pretty good at picking stocks. After 2 years, I had a nice nest egg and decided it might be a good idea to diversify into something other than stocks. I thought I'd buy a house or condo as an investment property. That's how I met Beth. She was my realtor. I didn't find a rental property that made sense as an investment, but Beth and I married 3 years later. Well, there you go. A few months back, we bought the house that Beth has since deeded fully to me. The money that bought the house was the money I saved and invested since I started working at 22. Beth's income she spent on herself. My income went to our living expenses, into savings and investments, and eventually paid for the house. Well, lads, you should never allow that. All your money goes into practical things for the future, and she's pissing away probably on clothes and shoes and handbags and cars, things that aren't going to appreciate in value. They're going to decline in value. She's materialistic. She's a spender. You're an investor. You're never going to work. Says here, so when I waited getting a divorce, I think about a judge giving her half of what I spent years working on and saving for. I'll play at reconciliation with Beth as long as I can. That keeps me away from a judge, and my property stays my property. Think of all the hard work and struggle you went through to get that money and investing it, and you're going to potentially lose it. Find a way to deal with the bitch for at least a year or so until what your lawyer strategized with you about. Think about that. Yeah, you can make it up over time, but still. Some of you suggest that I sell the house and somehow hide the money. Gift the money or the house to my parents or put the money in a trust. Even if I sold the house and figured out a way to hide the money, a judge could still award Beth half the value of the house, and I have to come up with the dough. Even if I had to dole it out to her in monthly installments, besides Beth as a realtor, she knows that I put the house on the market within hours. Hard to keep up with the reconciliation charade if the house where you're supposed to be living in happily ever is gone. Yeah, she's going to know. Remember, she's not stupid. Almost everyone in the comments section asked what happened to Beth's second secret phone. The phone I found in her coat when I was packing up the clothes, I just turned it on to see if Beth was using it, keeping it charged. She was. I kept it, but I didn't try to open it. I found the phone a few days after I threw her out. Finding out about Beth's betrayal was exhausting physically and emotionally. I didn't need to know what was on the phone. I didn't need any more proof of her infidelity to decide that she and I were done. When I found the phone, I didn't have the energy or really any reason to open it. But Mr. Boss, Beth's former employer, gave me the reason to open the phone. More on to that soon. Yeah, we're all going to get into Mr. Boss here. I didn't tell Beth that I had her secret phone or that I had pictures of her with her coworker Tom. She emailed me that she's missing some stuff and asked if she can come by the house to look at for things I hadn't packed. I asked what things, but she never answered. I guess she thinks the phone is sitting on the floor of the coat closet and hopes she'll be back home before I discover it. If I were to confront her about the phone, she'll probably deny it's hers. She'll tell me someone else, some visitor, must have dropped it off last winter when hanging up their coat. Again, nothing I would find in the phone helps with my divorce. As for the pictures of her and Tom together, they might prove useful. I can't use them in the divorce because infidelity doesn't matter here. Insane, but that's how it is some places. Well, a lot of places. I can't use them in the divorce, blah, 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 but I can use them if Beth challenges the settlement and post-nup. If Beth decides to divorce, either before or after the 1-year separation we agreed to, she'll want that more than what the post-nup gives her. To get more in divorce, she first has to get a judge to nullify the separation agreement and the post-nup. And then ask for half of the value of the house, alimony, and whatever she else thinks she's entitled to. Keyword entitled. But she had the paperwork for 12 days and told me she showed them to an attorney before she signed them. After that amount of time and seeing an attorney, she said she signed under duress and will be hard for her to argue. And I had her email saying that she signed them solely to show how much she treasures me and our marriage. Beth never suggested I forced her to sign anything. Well, that's great and all. Fine, great, but still, all it takes is one douchebag judge and then you're up shit creek without a paddle. Beth's better argument is that I deceived her about reconciliation. She'll claim that she was conned into signing the paperwork because I promised to try and reconcile. She desperately wanted to save the marriage, but I was never serious about getting back together. She'll want the judge to order marriage counseling and void the post-nup. At that point, my lawyer can pull out the pictures of her and Tom. The pictures are date stamped 2 weeks after I threw her out. Hard to argue that she wanted to save the marriage, that she treasures me and our marriage so much when there are pictures of her hands in hand with Tom in his shorts. If she initiates a divorce, there's a good chance that the separation agreement and post-nup will hold up. But I'll put off the chance of taking a chance as long as I can. Beth is still pursuing me and pushing me to let her come home. I wonder why she bothers. Easier to act like she's single if she is still single. And if I were to take her back, she knows I'd watch her like a hawk. So why press me to reconcile? I figure she doesn't want me back because she loves me so much. She had a marriage that was a pretty good deal for her. My income went to her expenses, savings, and eventually to the purchase of the house. Almost all her income she spent on herself. She wants to reconcile because she wants her Santa Claus back. Yeah, and you were a dumbass for going along with that. Absolutely should never have gone along with that. But probably this guy was thinking, I'm the provider taking care of the little missus. Meanwhile, the little missus is taking care of lots of guys. I want to put off seeing a judge as long as possible, so we play the reconcile game. I tell her I'm not ready to see her, I need time. I tell her that she promised to do a polygraph. I need to see what a polygraph says about her past infidelity before I can consider taking her back. She tells me she just started a new real estate agency and has to work double hard to get back to where she was in the commissions. She doesn't have the time to do the polygraph. Oh, for God's sakes, yes she does. Or she tells me that polygraphs are junk and won't reveal anything trustworthy anyway. How does she know this? Mostly she tells me she would wait a few months to take the polygraph to prove that she hasn't even thought about another man since the temporary insanity with Tom. Well, it could be another woman for all you know. One excuse after the other. She'll probably never take the polygraph. Great, except that I have to read and respond to her emails. It's like I'm already divorced in every way but legally. I have what's mine and can do what I want. As long as I never have to see her, I'm happy. If she ends up taking and somehow passing the polygraph, I'll come up with some new hoop that she has to jump through. I'm happy with the status quo and want it to last forever. I know, good luck with that. Yeah, dude, good luck with that. Remember, she's not stupid, and she can hire a smart attorney to find tricks. You have to expect the unexpected. I want to give a short update on the father-in-law and a longer one on Mr. Boss. First, my father-in-law. Yeah, this guy's father-in-law is a fucking ass clown. The last time I talked to my father-in-law, he called to try to convince me to take Beth back. He told me she really didn't cheat on me. She got some bad advice and foolishly planned a weekend that she never went on. I told him that it was his wife, my mother-in-law, who told Beth to cheat on me. That's right, I remember that now. And that all the wives my mother-in-law knows cheat on their husbands and believe it's good for their marriages. I got an angry email that night from Beth that her father packed up and left. She said I'm divorcing her for nothing, and now I'm ruining her parents' marriage too. No, your mother ruined their marriage, not this guy. Everything I know about my mother-in-law's advice to Beth comes from the talk my mother and Beth had. My mother called me a few days after I talked to my father-in-law to tell me that he called her. My father-in-law wanted to know from my mom if what I told him about his wife's advice to Beth was true, and especially about my mother-in-law's claim that all the wives she knows cheat. Did Beth really tell my mother that I was lying? After my call with him, my father-in-law confessed to Beth and my mother-in-law, and they said that what I told him, and they were all lies. They claimed that all my mother-in-law said to Beth was that if Beth did cheat, her parents would be disappointed in her, but they still love her at all. Still. They also claimed that my mother-in-law told Beth that she knew a couple of wives who cheated, but both ended up regretting their infidelity. They claimed that my mother-in-law didn't encourage Beth at all, just the opposite. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And those who watched those episodes know that. After my father-in-law pointed out my mother-in-law's late nights, her absences at odd times, and often not being where she was as she said she was, my mother-in-law admitted that she had an emotional affair with a coworker years and years ago. Ding, ding, ding. And it was a lot more than emotional. But she cut off before it became physical. Yeah, sure. After that admission, their argument became even more heated. My mother-in-law finally admitted that there was nothing wrong with a wife having SCX outside the marriage. You gotta be fucking kidding me. You can't make this shit up. Well, you can, but that mindset happens. That's what this guy's wife did. As long as everything is open and the husband is on board, she said she would never do that because she knows my father-in-law would never agree to such an arrangement. She would never hurt her husband. Famous last words. How many wives have uttered that phrase? My mother told me that my father-in-law really called her to get her permission to go back to his wife. He wanted my mother to tell him that he was making a big deal out of nothing and that I was the one lying, not his wife and his daughter. I asked my mom what she told him, and she told him everything I said was true. She explained to him the logic of cheating wives. They don't believe there's anything wrong with cheating. And that's what they convince themselves. It's absolutely amazing. They Jedi mind trick themselves, but deep down knowing they're Jedi mind tricking themselves. Many of them believe that it helps their marriage. The only thing standing in the way of them having some fun, fulfilling their needs, is their husbands. Oh, God forbid. So they believe their only choice is to increasingly resent their husband and go ahead and fulfill their needs elsewhere but keep the husband in the dark. What he doesn't know won't hurt him and may help the marriage. My mother explained to my father-in-law that if a wife believes there's nothing wrong with having SCX outside the marriage, she will find ways to do it. She knows plenty of wives over the years who spew that nonsense. Well, I'm going to say what we're all thinking here. Your mom's saying this, dude? Well, she seems to know a whole lot about this subject here. I hope that she's just heard this from other people, doesn't engage in this herself. But anyhow, most of them end up destroying their marriages. Shocker. Then they think, oh, so sorry. Mom told you you can never trust wives who think like that. If the husband forgives them, sooner or later, the wives just cheat again. Ding, ding, ding. No real consequences, so why not? My father-in-law thanked my mother and told her that leaving his wife was the right decision. He's going to divorce her. He asked my mother to apologize to me for not believing me and then yelling at me. Motherfucker, why don't you get on the phone and be a man and call and apologize to this guy yourself? Because he was yelling at him in the last video I covered. Mr. Boss, her former boss, sent me pictures of Beth and Tom that were taken by the PI. Mr. Boss hired to follow Mrs. Boss. Beth was caught up in their surveillance. I called Mr. Boss to thank him for the pictures. He asked if I was divorcing Beth, and I told him that I hadn't decided what to do. He said Beth wasn't worth it. I need to move on and divorce her. He said he was definitely divorcing Mrs. Boss. I should divorce Beth as well. He's obviously speaking in code. He doesn't want to say their names here. That was shortly after Labor Day weekend, about 3 weeks ago. Mr. Boss called me again late last week. He said he understood that I worked with information technology and he's looking for a new vendor for his 2 offices. Was I interested? I was, and we agreed to meet in his office last Monday morning. Hey, exchange notes, exchange pictures for him, his PI finding dirt on his wife, and hey, you can sell some equipment to him. Perfect. I arrived at the meeting early, but he kept me waiting for over 20 minutes after our scheduled appointment time. It was just outside his office, and I heard him talking to a car salesman. He ended his call, waved me to his office, and said it was a pleasure to finally meet me. I met him before a number of times at his company's events, but when we were introduced yet again, he always pretends that we're meeting for the first time. I guess I'm not very memorable. He was, as always, impeccably dressed and groomed. Perfect tan, slim and trim, not a hair out of place, expensive suit, tie, not a wrinkle in his bright white shirt. In other words, he's a douchebag. As I sat down, I wondered how many times a day he changes his shirt so he remains wrinkle-free. He's in his late 30s, early 40s. I always thought he was a little too smooth, a little too slick. But I could see how women would find him attractive. He asked how I was doing. Okay, I said, am I planning to divorce Beth? I told him I haven't decided yet. He looked unhappy and told me that I should just get on with it. Women like Beth and Mrs. Beth are parasites. You can't tell me this guy, based on this description, isn't a weasel himself. Come on here. He looked at me sternly and asked what kind of a man stays with an unfaithful wife. I must be crazy to even consider staying married. I replied that's probably true. I asked him about him and Mrs. Boss, and he said he's fine now and that she's out of his life. He thanked me again for the heads up about her and her affair with Tom. The PI got enough evidence for the infidelity clause in their prenup to kick in. She's fighting the prenup, but she'll walk away with nothing. He also said he's also fired Tom. I said Beth told me that Mrs. Boss was telling other realtors that Tom was messing around with the clients, and that Mr. Boss was worried about being sued. Was that true? He said when I called him about Mrs. Boss and Tom, he had his office manager look through Tom's past clients. One of Tom's clients, remember guys, Tom is the guy that's banging this guy's wife. A husband and wife put a contract down on a house but wanted the sellers to replace a sink that had a dent in the porcelain. The sellers declined and Tom's clients walked away from the deal. It was so minor, a couple $100 to replace the sink, that the deal should have gone through. Tom said should have paid for the new sink himself to close the deal. But the buyers didn't come back with a counter. When his office manager looked at what finally happened at the house, he found the same couple bought the property a short time later through another realtor. Something was wrong. Mr. Boss had the client's cell phone numbers from the file and called the husband. The husband said they really wanted that house, and after they put in the contract, his wife wanted to get into the house so she could start measuring for drapes and where to put furniture. Tom met her alone at the house to let her in late one afternoon and suggested they go out to dinner, and she finished measuring. Yeah, my female realtor liked to wine and dine me when I was looking for my house. He told her he had all sorts of alternatives, but interested interesting financial instruments that she and her husband might be able to use to purchase the house. And it would save him a lot of money. He could explain them to her over and over again during dinner. She could then tell her husband about them, and her husband would be impressed with her financial smarts. She told him that she and her husband can meet with Tom to discuss financing, but she was not going to go to dinner with him. Very smart, because this guy's a weasel. But Tom was insistent. It'll be fun, completely innocent dinner. Her husband will be so pleased that she did her homework, had all these great ideas regarding the house purchase. And Tom finds her very interesting and attractive and would like to get to know her better. This fucker's actually saying this. Tom can see that she's a strong, independent woman who doesn't need to ask her husband permission to do everything. Manipulation. No need to tell her husband that she gets the ideas from Tom. And Tom won't say a word to her husband about their dinner if he's the controlling, jealous type. When Tom started to rub her back, she stormed out and told her husband. Sexual harassment. They can sue the freaking real estate firm over this. The husband told Mr. Boss that they were so upset they were going to file a complaint and even thought about a lawsuit. But it was a he says, she said situation, so they dropped it. They also dropped Tom and Mr. Boss's agency. Mr. Boss said he told every realtor who would listen about how Tom treats clients. No one will hire Tom now. If Tom wants to continue real estate, he'll have to move far away that he's beyond Mr. Boss's reach. Yeah, exactly. Or start his own real estate firm, but that will still be a problem. I was there supposedly to talk about IT. We talked a little bit about what IT his company could use and needs. I told him a little bit about what my company offers, but he really didn't seem interested. After a while, he told me he'd think about what I told him and get back to me. I asked if he could show me his server room. He told me all the stuff is in the other office. He didn't bring you here to talk about equipment. He wanted to get more details to help him in divorce, as well as things about this Tom character. Then he asked me if I knew where Beth was. I realized that we were finally getting into why I was there. Why he really wanted to see me. I told him I think Beth's at her parents' house. He said that Beth was one of his best salesperson. Well, shocker, because I can only imagine what Beth probably did to seal a deal. Now that Tom and Mrs. Boss are both gone, he was thinking that maybe Beth would be interested in returning to work at her old office. But he wanted to make sure I was okay with it before talking to Beth. Yeah, Beth is probably fucking this guy too. He's a weasel. He tried calling and texting her, but the phone always seems to be off, and she hasn't replied to his messages. I looked at him curiously. He realized he needed to say something about why he's been calling my wife. He explained he tried to call Beth once or twice because he wanted to apologize for how Mrs. Boss treated her. But he can't get her on the phone. I asked why he didn't try to call her at her new job. He said he was reluctant to call her at work, but he finally called the office where he thought she was now. The person who answered the phone said he didn't know Beth. She didn't work there. I asked what office he called, and he gave me the same name of the agency. It's not where Beth got her new job, but I told Mr. Boss that's where I thought she was working. He smirked and said he hoped one of us would be able to track down my wayward wife. He pulled out his phone, opened it, and tapped the screen to make a call. It went right to voicemail, and we listened to Beth's voice saying, "Hi, this is Beth," following the rest of her voicemail greeting. Mr. Boss said that maybe her phone isn't working properly. Have I been able to talk to her? I told him Beth and I only communicate through email and asked what number is he calling. He read off the number just as he called. I shrugged and said I didn't know what to tell him. Yeah, this guy's a businessman. He wants her back because she's a good seller of properties, makes him money, but I'm also convinced that he was banging her. Keep trying, I guess. He asked again if I was okay with me if Beth came back to work for him. I told him I don't care where Beth works. He asked if I would give him Beth's personal email to contact her. Since she left his agency, she no longer has access to her company email. I gave him the email. I couldn't think of a reason not to. We shook hands and left. And that's where I'm going to leave things off, guys, because this is getting pretty long. And I know this wasn't a cliffhanger it ended on like other ones. However, we're going to get into more details about how Beth did business in the next video here. And you're going to see there's a reason why this guy wants her back, and probably for his own fun and all that. So we're going to continue on with this guy's adventure here. And again, 2 hours from now. So stay tuned. See you then.